Hi everyone, welcome back to our fisheries apiary where we've just popped out to check up on the bees and look at the Apipasta Plus pollen substitute that we've been putting on the bees. It's now getting towards the end of March. It's the 20th of March and the pollen substitute has been on for a short while now. As you can see beside me, the willows here in Norfolk are starting to flower. And we need to kind of now make a judgment call on when we stop feeding the substitute and we allow the bees to go on to the natural pollens, which they'll do anyway, but the weather's turned really cold again. So one of the things we've got to manage is the point at which we start to add queen excluders and supers. We've got bees that are due to go to oilseed rape for pollination, and we've got some very early oilseed rape that is almost at bud break, so it's about to flower. And we've got large colonies that are building up really strongly and are going to need to have supers added. But then we've got a situation where the colonies are growing, they've got lots more larvae, they need to get out and forage, but they also need to maintain that brood nest warmth in order to keep the larvae alive. And it's at this time of the year where perhaps, if you think in terms of graph structure, if you have a line that represents the brood and the increase in brood and the overwintered bees that may have started to fall off, in some colonies you may find that you get an intersection in that where the brood goes past the point at which the number of worker bees that you have in a colony can easily maintain that colony heat, that brood nest heat. And if the bees have then got to go out and forage to get pollen to feed the larvae, then that could also result in a cooling down of the brood area and result in chilled brood. And although we talk about chilled brood, I don't very often see it, because by the time we get into the bees and inspect, and we haven't inspected any colonies yet, by the time we get in to inspect, the bees will have broken cluster and will have cleaned out those cells, and we'd never know that there had been any larvae in there. So it's important that we try to support these colonies as we can. The next few weeks are going to be typically spring-like, so we're going to have some sunny days, but it's going to be very cold, around 7 or 8 degrees centigrade, and that means that they need to use a lot of bees in the colony to maintain that integrity, maintain that brood nest heat. So by adding some pollen substitute, we're allowing the bees to not only maintain that brood nest temperature, but also have access to some pollen substitute that they can then use to feed the larvae and to keep everything growing and developing. If we stopped feeding now, some of these colonies would struggle to be able to feed the brood, and eventually you'd have a situation where that larvae may well die. The Apipasta Plus has been going really well for us. We've got some colonies that have cleaned it out completely. Typically, and as with probably most fondants and pollen substitutes, some colonies take it really well, some takes a little bit and not all of it, and there are 1 or 2 colonies that haven't touched it. And that's just typical for the range of colonies that we have. But those that do need it are really feeding well on it. This is a range that's supplied here in the UK by Modern Beekeeping. If you take a look at their website, and I'll put links down in the description, have a look at the website, have a chat with Paul, get some sent out to you if you need it urgently for bees. But we are now fast approaching the point where we're not going to need it anymore for the spring, but it's useful to have if you want to add it to maybe a nuke colony or something like that as you start to get splits and maybe even swarms. So we'll go over into the apiary. I'll get my bee suit on. We'll just pop the roof on. The colonies that we had a look at previously, we'll just have a look at those, see how they've taken the pollen substitute, and then I'll make a decision as to whether we need to add supers, whether we need to move the bees over to the oilseed rape, and that's likely to happen in the next week to 10 days. So I'll get my suit on and we'll pop over into the apiary and see what's going on. This is the colony that we looked at on camera previously. They were working really well. I have been back since and had a quick look beneath the roof, and they were almost cleaned out. So I've got another pack of Apipasta pollen substitute here, Apipasta Plus. So we'll bring the camera down and just have a look to see exactly how they've got on. And wow, look at this. That is just unbelievable. They've cleaned out pretty much every last drop. I don't know whether the camera's seeing that. They're actually starting to put a little bit of comb in here, which is a sign that we need to think about getting, well, maybe not think about getting a super on, but we will need to get a super on. So I'm going to pop this one across on the other side. We'll just lift it up and move it across a little bit, and then we'll get this one in here nice and quick, and then the bees can come up and start feeding on that. Pop the lid on and we're sorted. So it's really just as quick as that. They've cleaned out pretty much every last drop. It just shows you how effective feeding bees with fondant and pollen substitute can be when you get through to the end of the winter period and into the spring. This colony is growing very, very rapidly. I've not taken the crown board off and looked underneath. That's something that I try not to do wherever possible, but it does look like they are very ready to have a super put on top of them. And this colony is one that we're going to take to the oilseed rape for pollination. So that will happen in the next few days. And because we've given that additional food, the additional pollen substitute and the additional fondant, that's allowed those bees to build up into a really strong colony. And we can expect, if we can control the swarming, we can expect that these will do very nicely on the oilseed rape when we've taken them across there for the pollination. Please do take a look at the Modern Beekeeping website, which is www.modernbeekeeping.co.uk. I'll pop a link down in the description below, as I mentioned. And if you do need to get some fondant, or as we move into the season, some syrups, do take a look at all of the range that Paul has at Modern Beekeeping. It's something that I use throughout all of our beekeeping now. It's a fantastic bee feed and one that I thoroughly recommend to you. We're going to take a look at some of the other colonies now, and what we'll do is we'll take the camera across and just take a snapshot beneath the roof of what the bees have actually done with the fondant that they've had. I suspect that we'll see some that have cleaned it out, some that have had a little, and there may be some that haven't taken it at all. So until next time, thanks for watching, and let's just have a look at what we've got in these other colonies.